I followed my dreams and opened an antique store to have adventures and spend time as a family. Sometimes you have to climb a mountain and open some new doors to find the treasures inside. This is our life, this is our adventure, and this is Curiosity Inc. Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode. So I thought I would cover off a topic that I've been asked many times, and that's how do you make money buying and selling antiques? So in this video, I'm going to go over a few tips and tricks, a few things that I've used in order to help us have this business and make some money around here. And hopefully we'll pass that insight along to you guys. So if you're looking at this as either a business venture or a hobby, that you'll have some success out there when you're buying things and then looking to resell. Another thing is, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button, which is probably floating around up in one of the corners here. Just hit the subscribe button, you'll get our updates and videos and more insights coming soon. So to give you a bit of our background, we have had the antique shop here for about 3 years, but I've been buying and selling antiques since I was about 9 years old. And for those that don't know, I'm 40 years old as of last week. So I've had a fair number of miles underneath my belt buying antiques and buying collectibles. So we thought that this would be a good opportunity for us to chat a little bit about how we do it and how we buy things and what do we look for. So if you've watched any of our videos before, you see I definitely look for interesting items and I try and find things that are a little bit more unique. Now, I have a theory, and I've been asked questions before on how do you find antiques, and we're in a city called Edmonton, Alberta, and if you didn't know, I'm in Canada. I'm not in the US. A lot of people think I'm in the US, but I am in Canada. So how is it that us being in this city, a northern Canadian city, am I able to find a bunch of really cool stuff? Well, my theory on that is that every house has something cool in it. Every house. So every single neighborhood you drive down the street, one of those houses has something really cool hidden inside of it. Some of them have tons of cool things. So there are tons of places to look for antiques. You're not just stuck, looking for a needle in a haystack. There's lots of places to go. We've had great success before we had the store with buying online or buying at yard sales or garage sales. Now that we have the store, it's a little bit easier because people will come into the shop and they'll either bring things into us or we'll get calls to go to their house and buy antiques from their place. So a few tips and tricks I have on the yard sale side of things. So if you don't have a business and you don't have the access to getting these leads on where these great collections are, there's a few things you can do. One is you can go around and look for yard sales, garage sales. You can get proactive and you can post on social media or in your local paper that you buy and sell antiques and you're always looking. That way you'll start to get calls. But if you're just out there kind of scrounging around looking through thrift shops and looking for things, there are definitely still deals to be found. So how do you know what's worth money? That's a great question. And somebody asked me before, like, how do you know what the value of things is? To frame it up, I guess, for me, when I was a kid, I used to do nothing pretty much but read price guides, books on history, for fun. I used to watch Antiques Roadshow when other kids were probably watching cartoons. So I grew up with kind of a different childhood where I always loved history. I loved antiques and I loved the thought of finding treasure. So I have sort of a backlog in my head of what things are worth. But value can change a lot. I'll give you an example. So one thing that has definitely changed in value in the last few years, about 10-15 years ago, you would find that plates and dishes were very collectible. For the most part, they have gone down a bit in value. So you'll find that a plate like this, which 20 years ago was worth $125, it might only be worth $10, $20 now. So that's a huge decrease in its value. And a lot of collectibles are generational. So things that people remember when they were growing up have maintained or grown in value. So in the 1980s, Transformers were just a toy, but now people are really collecting them. They've really gone up in value. So things that the current generation, people who are sort of in that income making age that are in their 30s through 60s or 70s, they are still maybe actively collecting and not downsizing. They're looking for stuff that they remember when they were a kid. My dad used to collect Howdy Doody and Roy Rogers stuff. That isn't as collectible now as it used to be because the prices come down. So you have to be cautious when you're buying because things that were valuable 10, 15, 20 years ago maybe have dropped in value now. So definitely have to be careful with what you're buying. That said, my opinion is that if something was really cool back then, it's still going to be really cool now. And certain things, like if you see there's a steam train kind of behind me back there, I'll see if I can get a close-up of it for you. Things like that steam train, that was built pre-war, It's made of solid brass, and somebody probably took many years of their life to build it. It's a beautiful thing, and it's always going to be a beautiful thing. It's going to be art, it's going to be functional, it's going to be collectible. So there are things going back many hundreds of years which will always be worth money. Examples of that would be, mechanical items, certain types of pocket watches, firearms. There are some collectibles, toys as well. A lot of times will keep their value because they're fun and people love to look at them. So if it's aesthetically pleasing, if it looks cool and it's functional, there's a good possibility that it's going to be worth money down the road. Now, let's say that you have a good frame of reference in terms of what value is. How do you go about buying something? So when we go into a house and it's full of antiques, I'll approach it one of two ways. One is I'm going to either try and buy the top 5-10% of the things that are in that property, because our store is not very big and I don't like managing big quantities of things if I don't have to, because it's just more simple, it gives me more time with my family. I'm really after the best stuff I can find. So if I get into a place and I'm able to buy the very best things just on their own, I will. But I've come across on occasion, such as the antique shop that we purchased out in Saskatchewan, where they wanted to sell everything and really didn't want to kind of have me pick and choose the stuff I wanted. So in a case like that, I've gone all in, pushed my chips across the table and bought the whole works. So if you're going to go that road, you have to really have a good infrastructure in place to get rid of all the excess, unless you want to be paying for warehouses and storage, or have your house filled up with stuff. Those aren't really great ways to go, because they're going to cost you money or space or your relationship if you put a bunch of stuff in your living room and your wife isn't happy about it, or husband. So you have to really be careful where this stuff is going. We use auction houses regularly to help clear inventory, and so when we brought back a lot of the stuff from Saskatchewan, we brought back what I felt was some of the better things to the shop, and then the rest we just put through auction to get our investment back. So make sure you have a good infrastructure in place. Get to know your local auction houses or eBay or whatever you like to do. I don't do eBay a whole lot, and the reason for that isn't that you probably wouldn't get okay money on it. It's that when you're selling, hundreds of things a week, that's a lot of effort and energy that goes into packing, shipping, tagging, and all that good stuff that can take away from the overall sale price, because you have to value your time at something as well. And I do value my time. I value my time greatly because I've got 3 kids and my wife, and we want to spend time with them. So make sure that you're investing time and money in the right kind of places too. So it's a fine balance. You might say, like, how do you haggle? How do you get that price? So if you are at a yard sale, let's say, and I'll just use this as an example, this is an old 1800s telescope. If you were at a yard sale and saw this and it had a $5 price tag on it, it's been there for a while, there's really nothing wrong with paying the asking price for something, because they've got it listed and priced and it's got a price tag on it. Where I do want to make sure that I'm paying, want to make sure that I'm taking extra time and care and caution when I'm paying for things, is if somebody's invited me to their house and asking my professional opinion on what the value of something is, it would do me no good at all to underestimate the value of something and try and get it for too good of a deal. Because, a couple things. A, they're going to walk into your store and see that you may not have been completely upfront about what you were going to be reselling it for. And secondly, it just doesn't feel right to take advantage of people in that way. So my theory on getting deals on things is, if it's at an auction sale or at a yard sale or garage sale, if it has a price tag on it and it goes for whatever it goes for, that's fine. Take your deal, be happy, and you can get a really killer deal sometimes on places like that. But if somebody's asking you your opinion on something, I typically abide by the 50% margin rule. And if you have ever worked in retail before, I'd say a good deal of the retail stores that are out there selling new products work on 50% margin, which means that if their wholesale cost is $5, they probably sell it for $9.99. So you try and make basically double up. And the reason for that is you have expenses to cover, we have staff, building, all that stuff. Now, the higher price you go, if you can start getting into things that are like thousands of dollars, and we do occasionally sell motorcycles and things like that, you're not going to be able to double your money on those things typically. So you have to take a smaller percentage. We prefer to bring things in the shop that have a slightly higher dollar value, because there's more profit to be made. So if I had the entire store full of things that were only worth $1 each, you'd be pushing really hard to try and make 50 cents an item. Where if you have a lot of things that are worth $100 each, well, you might have a chance to make $40, $50 an item. That's going to add up a lot faster. So Always keep your margins in mind, and make sure that you're paying, yeah, you can be upfront. If you tell someone, this is the one thing I learned, that when I was collecting, I actually felt that I got worse deals than when I told people I had a store. So I'd go into a place, and if I was looking as a collector, they would want full retail. But there's a switch in mentality, I think, when you're buying something and you say to someone, this is pretty much this is what I do. This is my business. So I have to buy and sell. So if you're buying something, you have to keep margin in mind. So if I say I'm going to sell this for, $15, which means I have to buy it for around $8 to make sense, a lot of times they're completely fine with that because you're giving them cash on the spot. They don't have to invest their time. And a lot of times you have to consider that people don't want to have strangers coming to their house and having to sell something for months and months at a time. So to have someone who's a dealer come by and buy a bunch of stuff all at once is kind of a nice thing for them too, because it's just done and dealt with. But again, you want to make sure that when they come in the shop, if you said you're going to sell it for $15, you got to have that price tag is going to be the one that's on it. So it's always good to try and be as upfront as possible in this business, because you'll get better leads, you'll get called back, and you'll get a chance to go to other people's places. So yeah, things that are collectible right now and things to look for. Again, toys are always really popular. We do a lot we do get vintage wristwatches as well. So if you saw the video I posted, I think about a week ago or so, where we bought a Ziploc bag at an estate sale full of watches. Now that was an opportunity for us to actually find a few cool things in there that we didn't know were in there, and that was really fun. Sometimes with things like watches, and this is the Pogue Seiko that I got in there, a watch like this will have value, but you have to service it. You have to get a nice band on it, make it look good. So sometimes you have to invest in the item in order to sell it for the best profit. And I'll give you an example of that. We got a vintage calendar rolled up, not really great shape, but I'm going to take it into the framing shop and show you what it looks like after it's done. So let me jump over to the framing shop here and show you what this thing looks like afterwards. So there is the before. It was wrinkled and rolled up for years. It's from 1931. It's an old McCormick Deering tractor calendar. But with a little TLC and a little creative matting and glass, this should turn out pretty good once it's all done. So in a few weeks' time, I should be able to get the update done, and it should be voila and looking much better. And today, we got it back. Now, with a nicer border and a mat, what goes from being almost garbage, to be honest, turns into a really lovely piece of art. And there are many people who collect tractor old calendars. This is from 1931, so it's got some real age to it. And McCormick Deering, of course, or International Harvester, very popular collectible. So nice piece. We weren't able to get all the little wrinkles out of it, but that gives it a little bit of age. And I think that would still look really great on someone's wall. And the question is, can antiques be a good investment? And the short answer is yes. In fact, I had a fellow named Joseph Hogue, who has a channel called Let's Talk Money. He's a financial analyst, and he lists this as being one of his top 7 investments for 2019 going forward. It's a stable investment. He did actually a little video on it, which I'll include in the description down below so you can watch it. He's an interesting guy. You gotta love him. He wears a bow tie too. But Joseph talks about how it's a safe and stable thing to put money into because it can climb and appreciate. And the nice thing about, in my personal opinion, is the nice thing about collecting antiques is that it's not just something that's sitting in a safety deposit box. It's not something that you don't get to enjoy. We only live once. You collect antiques and you have something really cool. You get to look at it and enjoy it and tell the story of that item with your family member and really experience it. And it's also keeping or maintaining its value. So really good, solid investment. And again, check out his link. I'll put it down below for you guys because he definitely mentions this in there as one of his top 7 investments. But as you guys are thinking about doing this maybe full time, there's a few things to consider. What sort of things are you going to sell? So I get asked a lot, why don't you carry a lot of china, glassware, or more jewelry, things like that? There is money to be made. I would say the china and glassware, as I mentioned, has kind of dropped in value substantially in the last 10, 20 years. So I don't really, and somebody's going to watch this and say, no, it's a huge investment. I know that there's pieces that are worth money and that are valuable, but for the most part, a lot of that stuff has gone down. Sadly, it's an undeniable fact that certain things have dropped in value. Now, if you're careful with what you're buying and you have a sense for what's selling in your market, you might already have a good grasp on it. But what we typically look for is stuff that the other stores aren't focusing on. So there are several antique shops in my area. There's a lot that have more pop culture kind of collectibles, you know, not that we wouldn't get into that a little bit ourselves here, but they have more of like the 1980s Fisher Price kind of toys, or you go to the other end of it and it is dishes and jewelry and stuff like that. So there wasn't a shop that carried stuff like, you know, old military muskets and you know, men's razors and mechanical things and that. So yes, we do have a stronger focus on what people consider male-oriented antiques. I don't really see that too much though, because we have a lot of female customers that come through as well. But I just basically buy what I think is cool. And so far, that's worked out pretty well for us. We try and carry a pretty eclectic mix of things, and it's worked out well. So before you think about getting into this business for yourself, make sure that you are aware of what the other vendors and dealers are doing in your area. Shop the other shops, check the other places out, see what product categories are missing in your market. So if you're really big into, like, let's say 1970s Star Wars toys and nobody else is doing it, maybe that's something you want to introduce to your market. Or, you know, maybe everybody's doing it and it's oversaturated. So you got to be very careful. We opted with our business here to buy the little unit that we're in. We didn't want to pay rent. You probably heard me talk in other episodes about how we had a store before. I've managed other retail stores for many years. I used to manage chains of retail stores in my past. But prior to that, about 15 years ago now, my wife and I owned a toy store. And we were at a pretty major mall. But the rent was very high. And you had to really push hard to make those sales every month, and pretty much all the profits went to the mall for mall rent, and we didn't want to be in that situation again where you're basically working nonstop just to have all of your money go somewhere else. So if you can find a low-cost rent situation, or even like a rent to own, or if you have the means to buy or already have a place, definitely recommend keeping your overhead down. And be prepared to work at your shop yourself. I do these YouTube videos. I go out and I do a lot of picking, and I also work the store 4 out of 5 days a week. So we have one employee who works on the weekend for us on Saturdays, and we make sure that we're closed Sundays and Mondays so that there's family time. And while Monday, you'd think that's a normal day to be open, but that's a day I also need to go out and go picking and look for stuff. So we'd opted to do that. And so far, it's been pretty good, you know, 3 years in. And haven't really had much of anything for complaints from customers because we are accessible 24 hours online. So if somebody really wants something badly, we can hold it for them if they send us an email. So that's a great thing about technology. And if you have the ability to do it, if you're on Instagram or Facebook or social media, and you can run your business that way, you don't really even need a brick and mortar store, and you'll save all kinds of money. So yeah, we just wanted to kind of chat a little bit about some things, some product categories that are good investments. And I'll do a little walk around of the shop here so you can kind of see what I'm talking about too. Sometimes if you focus on getting one-of-a-kind items like this, which is a Seth Thomas American-made Canadian Northern Railway clock, it's almost 6 feet tall. We picked this up just a couple months ago. As far as I can tell, this is about the only one that's available for sale anywhere right now. So when you have one-of-a-kind items, there isn't much for price comparisons. So you have to be careful, look back at prior auction estimates or what other ones have sold for. But if you carry really rare stuff, nobody else is going to have it in town, and you're certainly going to have a one-up on them. Surprisingly, oil cans have really gone up in the last little while. I know that doesn't seem like something that would be a collectible, but yes, people do buy vintage oil cans. They like the graphics, they collect them, and there are large communities, and some of them can be worth thousands of dollars. So never overlook an old oil can. If you're at a garage or at a yard sale or something, you might end up coming across something really neat. Old parking meters, things like this. The reason why we buy these, people decorate their garage with them. If you have a really neat old car and you want to put something in your garage to make it feel more interesting in there, people buy stuff like this to decorate with. Same thing with old advertising signs. That's British American Oil, BA Oil, which is no longer around, very popular vintage station signs, so people do buy those as well. And in some cases, you can make your own collectibles. So I have taken a tripod off of an old transit survey and a headlight off of about a 1913 Cadillac and put them together and made this accent home piece. We've made a couple of these in the past and they always seem to sell. So with what can be several $100s in materials, you end up having potentially a $1,000 collectible because people want it as home decor, and home decor always sells. People love having stuff in their house that tells a story. Here's my last tip of the video for you, is that you can't fall in love with the merchandise. You have to be able to sell anything. So when it comes to business and you're a collector, and myself, I love collectibles. I take very little home. It has to be about the business. It has to be about making sure that your family is taken care of, or whatever reasons you're doing this for. And here's my last tip. I strongly recommend that if you are going into this as a business and you're a collector, you have to really draw the line at what you're bringing home. I don't take a whole lot of stuff home myself because we are trying to run a business here. I love old stuff and I love the adventure of finding it. But at the end of the day, we have to pay bills and I have to look after my family and kids. So I can't fall in love with the merchandise. I can enjoy it while it's at the shop, but you have to be able to let it go. And the other thing is, you have to be able to let it go in a short amount of time. If you find yourself sitting on merchandise for a really long time, it's probably a good idea to either re-merchandise your shop, to move things around so it looks different, to readjust your prices that you have things priced at, or potentially look at doing what I do, and that's taking some things to auction. So I go through and I take stock that maybe I've bought and it hasn't done as well as I thought it would, or I'm not getting interest in it, and I move it out the door. And it's not a bad thing to lose money. Now, that's something you probably won't expect me to say. If you bought something for, say, $50 and it's been sitting there for 2 years and somebody offers you $40 for it, you could take that $40, even though it's a loss, and reinvest it in something that's worth $80, and then reinvest that money into something else, and it grows. So I had a friend once say you can make money by losing money, and that's pretty much what he meant, is that sometimes you have to take that loss to get your seed money back, your capital back in your pocket, so you can go out and buy better stock. It's an education in this business, and it's always a learning game. So you are going to have moments where you make a miss or you make a bad investment. You try and minimize that by being fairly educated in terms of what you're buying, but don't beat yourself up too much over losing a couple bucks here and there. And if you've probably seen some videos, I had a motorcycle that I lost like well over $1,000 on. You don't want to do that too often, let me tell you, because you won't be in business very long. But I took the money that I got from that bike that was sitting here for a long time, and I took it and I reinvested into more inventory, and then that sold and I bought more, and it kept ballooning. So if you take your money and reinvest it, you should be just fine. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to email us or mention it in the comments below. I'll try and do my very best to answer them. This was just kind of like a cursory us chatting business a little bit, which I hadn't really done before, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much again for watching. Again, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you all soon. Bye for now.